All right, all right, all right. It's that time of the week again. Happy Wednesday. My name is Brian Brinkman. I'm a producer here at Osiris Media. I'm here with my wonderful friends, my great friends, Megan and Jonathan. One of my favorite times of the entire week where we get to come together after days of infighting about what show we should cover and which is the best era of fish and if it was actually a good show or if you didn't like it and what the best jams are. We finally get to come together, we coalesce, we share some good vibes, we talk some fish. It's a really, really great part of my week. How are the two of you doing here?
It's pretty good. I'm kind of over you telling me that my opinions are garbage, and I'm ready to just go ahead and get into the show.
As long as we don't talk about Roger, I'm good.
I love that song. At least you say it right.
I'm excited. I'm so excited about today's guest.
I am too. We have an awesome guest coming up here. Chris Pandolfi of the infamous String Dusters is going to be joining us here shortly to talk about a show that he was at, a show that he played an after show at, and we're going to get into all the nitty gritty of. Megan brought it up before we went live, like the idea of going to a concert. Like there's something about going to a concert and then going to an after show after the concert that like I feel like by the end of that first concert you kind of have to prep yourself for. But then the idea of going to a concert and then going to play a concert, I don't even understand how one has the mental capacity or the energy to do that. But I'm very excited to find out because it's a very cool thing.
I don't have it in me to attend 2 concerts in a row. I've very rarely ever done it, even when I was young and it seemed like a
Really?
reasonable thing to do. Nah, I'm done. I'm done.
Oh my God, I have
Are-
such ambitious
I can't
plans for
imagine playing
April.
one.
Oh my gosh, I have like after parties like every night. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm like 20 again. This is
is
gonna be
is your
We'll have to get
husband
into
just
those
looking
soon.
at like is your husband just looking at that like block of time as Megan is not around to parent
I
during
hope
this period
so.
like have you told school,
If he's not,
it's
he needs
movie
to be.
week.
Totally. If he's not, he needs to be. I'm considering like getting a hotel, even though I live in New York, because I don't know if I can show my face after like being out double bills 2 nights in a row at least. I don't
It's
know.
hot
It's gonna
dogs
be
and pizza night for the kids all week long.
exactly.
That was my
Exactly.
wife
Yeah.
went to Vegas and I streamed all the Vegas shows, and she called one morning. She was like, so have you been having a good time with the kids? I'm like, yeah, like they're eating a lot of mac and cheese and a lot of pizza, and it's a lot of really like easy food that's just a ton of fun
They're loving
because
it.
I
Yeah.
have to watch these fish shows too, and you're at the fish shows, so the kids are just like, they're hanging out, they're having a good time. The last time I did the show followed by after show was the Vegas 2018 run. I went to November 1st, and friend of the pod, host of HFPod, I mean, one of the greatest people ever, Matt Dwyer, um, got me into some shenanigans going into the fish show, which then
Mm.
spilled over into him pulling me into an Uber to go see the Disco Biscuits, who wouldn't start until 1:45 in the morning, and the show
What?
ended at 5 a.m. and I went home and wrote a fish.net review. That was like
I'm
the
gonna go
most
look that review
aggressive
up
fish
Me
attendee
too.
right
slash
now.
coverage. It's a great review. I got a lot of pushback though about certain opinions that I had about lyrics, which was
That's
interesting.
how you know you did it right.
Yeah, it is. It
Exactly.
is. I
Yeah,
slept for like 8 hours. I woke up and I went and got some noodle soup, which was like the greatest food I've ever had in my entire life. And then went to one of the best fish shows I've ever seen. So,
Mr. Dwyer is
um,
usually ready to go to an after show. I've seen that a few times, and that's usually when I'm like, "Oh, excuse me."
the man has eternal energy. I don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
good for him.
Oh
It's
my
it's
gosh, I need to
incredible, but like
channel him in April.
because he and I were talking about it at like before the show, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pull a John. I'm just gonna duck out, and they're never gonna see me. And we ran into each other walking out, and he was like, all right, let's go. And that was it. There was no way around it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Of course, it was
But
fun.
we're going to talk a little bit more about that here today. Really excited to bring Chris on here in a second. Before we do that, is there anything else you guys have to share about general vibes? What's going on with you all this week, or can we jump into the ad break?
Let's get down to it. I'm
Yeah,
get
let's
down
do
here to talk
it.
about music. I'm making music all week, talking about music all week. Let's carry on.
Making, talking, all that sort of stuff. Shout out to friend of the pod, Ryan Storm, for saying, hey, Ryan is hanging out. He's super excited for us to chat his show. He and I were texting about this last night. This is a show that he really loves. So I'm really excited to
Oh,
to
cool.
present this here. But
Cool.
before we do that, we want to remind you of our friends at Sunset Lake CBD. What an incredible company. You know what I mean? Like, what an incredible company. Sunset Lake CBD has a line of smokable hemp products that are for old deadheads or young fish fans. Anybody who are searching for the mellow body high. Smoking CBD has all the benefits of high THC cannabis without the paranoia or the anxious side effects. With 9 different strains from this year's harvest, there's something for everyone. The Hawaiian Haze is awesome for an outdoor show. Cherry Abacus is best for the end of the night. And all the flower is grown, cured, and trimmed by Sunset Lake CBD farmers. Even better, Sunset Lake CBD's farm to table approach gets you great pricing on premium CBD flower by shipping directly, as we said, from their farm to your door. I recently got a care package from Sunset Lake CBD, and it is my favorite thing in the world right now. And that is not hyperbolic in any way. Like we said in the ad here, it's very calming, very peaceful, without a ton of paranoia, without any sort of anxiety. It's great at the end of the day. I take a nice little walk. I use the pre-rolls. They're fantastic. The little buds that I've got go great in a nice little pipe. Even the oils and the gummies are fantastic for late night. So I've been loving it. Check out Sunset Lake CBD today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use the coupon code HFPod. Again, that's HFPod for 20% off all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown. And with that, let's bring on our very special guest, Chris Pandolfi of the infamous String Dusters. Chris, how you
What's
doing,
up,
man?
guys? How we doing?
How are you?
Welcome.
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome. I'm excited to go deep with the experts here. See if I can hang.
Oh, are there some other people coming on?
Yeah, exactly.
We've actually got a potential expert who has just come into the wings, and we're going to bring him on as well right now. Mr.
What?
RJB.
What?
RJ.
Oh,
What's going on,
man.
everybody?
Surprise drop in today. How you doing,
Hey.
man?
Hey there, RJ.
Sorry, guys. I wanted to be here from the beginning, but I had a thing to deal with, and then I was like, I don't really want to miss this conversation. So here I
All
am.
right. Good to see you, brother.
Yay.
Good to
This
see you
is
too.
awesome.
Good to see all you guys. I just want to say that Chris was like one of the earliest Osiris supporters and advisors, and has helped me figure out a lot of stuff over the years, and put his show in our hands when he launched it. And I'm very grateful to you. So thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. It's an honor to be on the team. I love what you guys are doing. I believe in Osiris, and it's been a great journey for me being a podcast host. I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but good to see you, RJ. Glad you could join us.
He's
we
also a
love
money
your
farm
haircut,
kicker,
RJ.
right? Come on.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Megan.
It's a great haircut. It's a really good
It's
haircut.
quite a
Looks very
change,
sharp.
but that's not why we're here, is it? Unless it is.
That's not why we're here. Chris, you just got off of the road. I believe
Yep.
you have 10 days off now between shows that you're playing with Green Sky. You'll be going back on the road with Green Sky, and then you guys will be doing headlining tours over the next couple of months. Tell me what life is like on the road in January, February 2022. How does it feel to be out playing shows right now?
I don't think he's sitting that still.
I don't think he's sitting that still. I can answer for him. I think it's great. I think it's great to be out on the road at this point in time. I'm gonna make a quick adjustment here.
Well, I can say something about that while we wait. I'm sure he'll reconnect here in a second. Is that I went to a show last week. In fact, it was immediately after this, the HFPod last week, and everybody probably heard me ready to run out the door about 10 minutes before we finished. And it was Courtney Barnett. It was the 9:30 Club. It was a great show. 930 Club was really good about masking and vaccine checks and all of that stuff. They really police it hard. She played 2 nights, 930 Club, and after the second night, the Thursday night, so Friday morning, she posted on her socials that somebody in their crew had tested positive and they were putting off the rest of the shows. So,
Wow, that's a
yeah.
bummer.
And it's just happening all over. So glad Chris has, feeling well and has made it home, and hopefully he'll make it back on here with us. But it is wild out there right now.
It is, it's cases are dropping, which is a really good thing. It looks as though we keep hearing tour announcements. It looks as though shows are coming up, but yeah, you're absolutely right. That's kind of the risk that is being run at this point in time. I'm going to see the War on Drugs in just about 10 days out here in Denver, and they made ton of adjustments going into this tour. They cut all opening acts. They had to postpone 2 gigs in Nashville and one other city I'm blanking on right now as a result of COVID exposures. So, we're just seeing the flexibility that is needed by artists. But once we get Chris back on, it'll be great to hear how that tour goes. In the spirit of things, though,
I want to jump on what you just said, RJ. You just saw the War on Drugs, didn't you? And tell us how
at the Met.
Good that was. Assuming it
So
was
good, so good. It was so great. They're so great. That's really all. So I got to become friends with Charlie Hall, the drummer, and then finally got to see him in action, and it was so cool to see him playing with the band because he's like a drum machine himself, and it's so great. I just want to say while we're waiting for Chris to come back, I went to the new Brooklyn Bowl Philadelphia over the weekend and saw Mark Brownstein's band, and I'm going back tonight to see Humphreys McGee. So I'm like back. I'm back seeing shows, I guess.
You're back, and I'm here. I'm like looking at tour dates and going, do I really? Shall I really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I looked at the Fish rumored tour dates that are floating around, and they didn't get me excited like I thought they would. I thought I'd be like,
really? And you both assured me that we would have tour dates by this week. I have to say.
I told you that they would come as soon as we drop the podcast.
Okay, so tonight after we drop the podcast.
Yeah,
tonight,
probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
RJ, after I saw your post about the War on Drugs, I was out to dinner with my husband for his birthday and the family, and I was back at home realizing they were playing at MSG, and I was like trying to convince him to go last minute, and had been snowing here. He's like, it's a snowstorm. I'm like, we can make it to MSG. We can see them. So I'm going to see them next time they come. I know.
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
Chris, welcome back, man.
Full on power outage here in Denver. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, wow.
Shit.
I wonder if it's going to reach me. Where in Denver are you?
So I live in South Denver off of South Federal. And in a cool little spot called Harvey Park.
Yeah, I love it down there. I'm up in Arvada, so we have not yet reached the blackout, the power outage that you're receiving.
Okay, well, when you
Different
drop
grades.
out, we'll cover for you.
Yeah. Well, man, let's jump into it. I want to hear what life has been like for you on the road, what it's been like playing shows, how you guys have kind of adapted to it all. What have kind of been your highlights of touring over the last couple of weeks?
It's not without its challenges, that's for sure, but we're all very grateful to be back out there playing, and it's an adjustment period, and we're all getting used to some new elements of touring that I think will be around for a while. But I do think that things are headed in the right direction, and I feel like people's appetite for live music is sky high. So as we head toward warmer weather and hopefully better news on the health front, I think things are trending in the right direction. And even it's a very different time than it was 2 years ago, a year ago. Like, the more we learn, the more we move forward, no matter what the circumstances are. So that's good news for all of us. And we're just doing our best to, keep things safe and keep the keep the tour going, and we were able to do that. Like I said, it wasn't without its challenges, but the shows were great. And there's this kind of stride that you hit on tour, and an interesting kind of way to think about the past 2 years, because starting in March 2020, we were all grounded for about a year, and then things kind of crept back to life. But as long as I had been an adult, from the time I was like out of college, I was playing shows, and I never had more than a few weeks without a show. Literally, my entire adult life, the last 20 years. So to have that break and to have it, not necessarily on our own terms, was challenging in a lot of ways. And now we're really starting to hit a stride that you hit when you're just playing night after night. There's something that's really important to the sound of 5 people playing music together, or whatever the act is, that you are just really getting used to things and getting in the groove when you're playing live night after night. So we're starting to feel that and starting to take more chances. And, I think things are only going to get better. So it's been great to be back out there, and I can't wait for more shows.
Did you find, like, with that extended break, that you had to adjust your own like touring preparation, or like how you approach playing concerts, or did you just kind of jump back into it as though there hadn't been that 18-month break or whatever it was?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at a moment ago. It was tough. And I think there was part of the arc of playing shows that was just totally built in. It's totally innate part of who we are as people, as performers. And we never had a long enough break to really get on any perspective on necessarily what that thing is, and now we're confronted with this extended break. And then when we were starting to get ready to come back, I definitely was, thinking about it differently, and just kind of thinking about it more, and not necessarily feeling quite as natural about things. And that sounds bad on the surface, but it's not all bad. I think there's a lot of evolution going on, and we're all having to figure out a little bit of a reinvention for ourselves. And it's not about trying to go back to what we were in the past. It's about trying to move forward to become a new thing. And when you put it in that, in those terms, and you look at it with that perspective, there can be very positive elements of this. But it took a while to get to that. And I know it took me a lot of work to get back to playing and performing the way that I want to be able to. I'm even maybe still working on that. Maybe that's a lifelong process, but it never looked the way that it did after we had that huge break.
Yeah.
What were the fans like, Chris? Did you notice anything different, or with the crowds this time around?
The fans are ready to go, which is great. And I think that one of the challenges for us has definitely been kind of the optics of all these canceled shows, which is such a pain in the ass, and it kind of unavoidable. I mean, if you decide to be a performer for your life, this is something that you're going to deal with and that you should figure out how to get used to. But this was a whole new level of it. And I think fans sort of had this attitude, like, let us decide. You just put on the shows and let us decide if we want to come. And that's not really how it works, and we're people too. And we've got these, with the Dusters Green Sky touring party, it's like 25 people, so there are massive considerations that we have to look into. And then in the instances where we have to cancel shows, it just can be such a letdown for people. And I put a video on my Instagram when we sadly had to cancel the Bluegrass Generals shows in Denver in January. And I just said, in a very hopefully heartfelt way, no one is more bummed to miss these shows than I am, and now I think we're getting clear of that. But, I've also thought that in the past, and then it sort of boomeranged around and kind of, bit us in the ass. So I don't know exactly where it's headed, but I know that I'll never take a second on stage for granted ever again. And I think that the fans are feeling an element of that too. And you can see it, you can feel it. And the thing that characterizes a String Duster show, which is not unlike the thing that characterizes a Phish show, is, when you're willing to put it out on the table, the band and the crowd alike, great things can happen. And it's a sort of high risk, high reward music environment where you can take chances and you can go to these amazing, unique, momentary places together. But that doesn't come without some commitment on the part of both the band and the fans. And now that we all have this newfound perspective, I feel like there are some really energized moments where we're able to jump into that zone that, of course, we've all been familiar with from so many shows in the past. But to be back there after, such a weird couple of years is just an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I think that a lot of, I wanted to say fans, but it may not be the right word. A lot of concert goers forget sometimes that it's not just your job to make music, but you're there for almost the same reason we are. You're there to get that food from the playing the music, not just the audience interaction, but the musical interaction, the whole thing, right?
For sure.
And so, of course, people who do consider that, they're the fans you want. They're the ones who recognize that you want to be there as much as they want to be there.
Yeah, and of course, it goes without saying that the vast majority of fans are like that. It's just like in any area of life, the minority is always the most vocal. And that is a thing that you just have to get used to dealing with. But, that's just part of growing as a person, as an artist. And I think that is one of the silver linings of what's going on. Like I said, there's a reinvention happening with a lot of artists. And we're, for the first time, able to kind of step off this hamster wheel of touring, which is the music business environment that we inherited, not necessarily the music business environment that we chose. That was just how you made a living. You go out, you play 100 shows a year. We're in the streaming era now. And so, a band like the String Dusters, we do make, decent money off of those things, but we've been a band for 16 years and have have a Grammy and 3 nominations. And we have really put in the work to get there. But when you're just starting out, and when I say starting out, I'm talking like the first 10 years. I'm not talking about the first year, and there takes a level of commitment that you have to be all in, and being all in means going out and going on tour. So now we've had this break, and I think people, for the first time in their lives, a lot of people who have been on tour just constantly have had a chance to survey the landscape and think about things a little bit differently and understand what their career might be comprised of in a little bit of a different way. And like I said, there's can be some real positives in there.
Was it a creative time for you in the band when you were off? I think a lot of bands and musicians took that as a time to play a lot and create new music. Was that the case for your band?
Yeah, it was really creative time for the band, as a band and as individuals. One of the unique things about the String Dusters is we have 5 very unique and forceful musicians, people who, we all make solo albums, and I think we all put out solo albums during the first year or so of the pandemic. And I made this crazy record called Transbanjo that was like a humongous undertaking that I had started before the big pause, and kind of put it on the shelf because I was playing all the instruments and doing all of this experimenting with vinyl sampling and all these weird things. And I loved the concept. I just, I don't think I really had time to see it through, because when you're on tour and you come home, there are rare times where you're so inspired that you jump into work, but a lot of times you really just need to decompress and do life, and that's another thing that I think people who aren't on tour don't necessarily know, but you got to recharge the batteries. And I just sort of had this project on the shelf, put an insane amount of time into it during the summer of 2020. And then it came out in February of last year. Falco put out a record. Andy Hall, he had 2 records that came out. Jeremy put out a solo record. Travis has got this new sort of podcast live show in Brevard where he lives. So it was really prolific on that front. And then as a band, we did 2 albums. So we did the new String Dusters record that comes out late February, so like a week or 2 away. And then we did this tribute to Bill Monroe that we just got a Grammy nomination for. So, and we did the Bill Monroe thing remotely. We did the String Dusters record together. We really can't do a String Dusters record remotely. It just doesn't capture what is so essential about the 5 of us playing together, what we've really learned how to do over time. So yeah, there was a lot of creativity flowing. A lot of people were live streaming. We did some of that, and also had some downtime. And I feel like right now I'm really starting to rev up, back to that place that I was before, or I should say, moving forward to a new place that, is more evolved as an artist. And I'm taking on some challenges with music that have always been there that I haven't necessarily had time to address, just because, like I said, we're always touring. So yeah, there was a lot of creativity, and that's just always going to be the case with this band. There's just a lot of really eclectic influences, a lot of things we're trying to accomplish, and a lot of output.
Chris, I just want to say congrats on the another Grammy nomination. You're in Best Bluegrass Album, and the other nominees are Billy Strings, Bela Fleck, who I know is like your idol and hero, and Billy Strings is a collaborator, Sturgill Simpson, Rhonda Vincent. I mean, amazing company to be in. Yeah. Really amazing.
The chance that we win that award is so freaking low. I mean, it is true. I mean, if I could go back in time and tell 18-year-old me that I'd be nominated, for a Grammy alongside Bela Fleck, who I would have never discovered the banjo if it wasn't for Bela Fleck. I didn't know anything about bluegrass. I didn't know anything. I started seeing this band and I thought that's what I want to do. And I never really looked back. So yeah, it's such an incredible honor. I mean, that will just never get old, and I think being nominated this year is extra special because a lot has changed in the 15 years that we've been a band. And when we started out, the scene that we are experiencing today, the jam grass scene, for lack of a better term, was really nothing like it is now. And Yonder was kind of the only game in town. Cheese was sort of on a break. Salmon, similar story. And Green Sky, they started a few years before us, but we had to really kind of cut our own path. And bluegrass was just it wasn't a really valuable marketing term. I think it was really associated with like the music that your grandfather listened to and the South and these sort of dated elements of bluegrass that are still a part of the music, but it has really, come into the modern era. And I think that process, it's been an honor for us to be a part of that process. And now where we're at right now, bluegrass is like hotter than ever. I mean, it's incredible to behold. And so to be nominated for a tribute to Bill Monroe, which is something we probably never would have done in our first 10 years as a band, is really cool, because then fans of the String Dusters who don't know anything about traditional bluegrass are going to listen to this record and they're going to go back to the roots, which really weren't that long ago. I mean, we're talking 1945, and when we started playing bluegrass, Earl Scruggs was still performing, the first generation guys. And now a lot of them have passed on. And this is sort of our way of paying homage to this incredible, uniquely American art form that is right now getting more attention than ever before. So to shine a light on the forefathers and then to get nominated, that's like extra special.
It's kind of amazing the number of peaks bluegrass has had, and every time it's bigger and bigger, and then it backs off a little and the world gets interested in other things, and then bluegrass keeps coming back.
Yeah, and it's among aficionados. Like Fish is a great example. I mean, those guys have been playing, Uncle Pen, and they get, I remember seeing the Del McCurry band at, I think it was Oswego.
Yep.
And, and like Phish is known for really not having other bands on the bill. And I think that Dell and them were, I was watching them, they were playing like on a stage that was part of a tractor trailer truck in this dusty little lot. And, I was so into it, but people in the know have been onto this music for a long time because it's the real shit. I mean, it's really powerful. And of course there's this theme of sort of musical virtuosity, but that's not what it's about. It's really a soulful sound. And, it's just music that people connect to, and they're fans of it. Even though they've never been exposed to it, they don't know they're fans of it, and then you put it in front of them and it's like, wow, what is this? And that's happening on a scale right now, like we've never really known. And it's really cool to behold and really cool to be a part of.
It's like classic Americana.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there aren't really many
roots.
There aren't many music, forms of music that were really crystallized here in the United States. And the roots do run all over the place. And, the banjo goes back to Africa and these sort of Scottish, Irish fiddle traditions. But I mean, bluegrass was born and raised in the US, starting in 1945, 46. So it's unique that way. And, it now that it has this spotlight on it, and evolution is being encouraged, because that's always been sort of a weird thing in bluegrass where the traditionalists kind of want to keep it under wraps. But when music gets popular, it goes where it's going to go, and the people decide, the fans decide. And so right now that evolution is really happening, and that's going to be the thing that even pushes it further, up to the next level is new artists and new voices, new influences. And so, the sky's the limit.
With that, maybe we should talk about the upcoming new season of Inside the Musician's Brain. I could sit and talk with you about bluegrass for hours. I don't know about these guys, but
we can keep going down.
I'd be down for that.
Tell us about what's coming up on the new season of the podcast.
Yeah, so I just relaunched after a break, and it's funny because sometimes RJ and I reminisce about like in the first season, and like Osiris was just getting started, and I'd have like an episode coming out on Tuesday morning, and I'd be texting with RJ Monday night at like 11 p.m. and just everything was a mess, and we didn't have it ready to go, and I wasn't on my game, and we were just and finally I feel like I'm ahead of the game, and I have to be because we have a lot of touring coming up. So I really, and it's like, it's always more fun and gratifying to work on something when you're not rushing at the last minute. And so I think that's a product of experience, both in regard to knowing that law sort of pertains to the podcast, but also just getting better at it and figuring out my voice and not belaboring the point, and just understanding a little better, what I want to do with the podcast. And, I have an intro to every episode that runs, 10, 12 minutes. And I put a lot of thought into those. And, I feel like that's an awesome part of the outlet for me. I used to spend ungodly amounts of time figuring out how those should sound and what they should cover. And now it's just all getting a lot more natural. And of course, as the pod has grown and reached more people, it's easier to get guests on. So I had Aoife O'Donovan, who is an incredible musician who has a great new record out. She's a member of I'm With Her, and has a great solo career, plays with the Goat Rodeo Sessions with Yo-Yo Ma and Chris Thiele. Bela Fleck is episode 2, which that was like, let me see if I can keep my shit together for an hour while I talk to the guy who, and I've been around Bela, I mean, we're buddies, he's sat in with the Dusters a number of times, but when I'm around him, I do have this feeling of awe that I don't really have around anyone else, because it's like, what would I be doing with my life if you hadn't done what you did? So that was just really cool to, go deep with Bela. I've got a whole episode with the Dusters planned where we break down songs from our new record. I'm doing planning a similar thing with the Green Sky guys while we're on tour. I'm going to bring my podcast rig out on tour, get them to sit down with instruments in hand. So Maggie Rose is going to come on. I'm really excited about that. I've been checking out her music, which is awesome. And she's got a really interesting story to her career, which I can't wait to dig a little bit more into. Corey Wong, who is a freaking maniac. I mean, he's about as prolific and productive as any musician I've seen ever. So lots of really, really cool stuff on tap for this season. And yeah, it's been great to get it going again.
Yeah, we love having the show back. It's such a fascinating deep dive into just the way that musicians think, the way
Thank
that
you.
artists kind of put songs together, and it's one of my favorite shows that we have here at Osiris. So
Thank you.
I'm stoked to have you back. Absolutely, man. I'm really stoked to have the show back. Should we transition and talk a bit about Fish?
I just want to say I'm
please.
taking notes here. This whole idea of like being ready in advance while producing a podcast. Like I'm gonna try that on my show. Like I'm running them up right in the weekend before I drop them. So
it's just like any other lesson. You need to fail like 100 times before you get it right.
Well, I'm at episode 106, maybe if I do another one. So yeah.
Have you hit your 10,000 hours though? That's the key, because once you hit that, then you're good.
Ain't no clocks.
I think to answer your question, we should get into some Fish here. That's what the people are here for on HFPod. It was really fun for me, just kind of like RJ hit me up about this, and of course I was excited to do it, but then comes the matter of choosing a show and then reliving that show, which is just such a fun, cool experience, and something that we're all able to do these days, with Nugs or Live Fish or whatever. But when it's a show that you've been to and you have some connection with, it's cool. It's kind of like there's a whole other layer there. So it's been fun digging back in.
Yeah, I've been enjoying going back down memory lane and listening to this. Tell us really quick, how did you get into Fish? And I'm curious, like you talk about Bela Fleck being such a huge influence on you and really turning you onto the banjo. Did your exposure to Fish playing bluegrass have anything that had to do with your kind of push towards that route musically, or did that not come till later?
That didn't really come till later. And I think that my affinity for that side of Fish kind of came later after I discovered the banjo. But, Fish was really what got me into music in general. And when I was in high school, my older brother was in a band, and, just like so many other people, music was just right in the middle of my radar screen. It was something that I loved, that spoke to me, and it was a way that I connected with other people. And then of course discovering artists and all the sort of pride and energy that goes into that. I mean, it was just something that I loved. And when I discovered Fish, I guess that was really the thing that put me over the top in terms of seeing live music. I had seen some bands that I was into. And then my brother gave me a copy of Lawn Boy for Christmas, and I started to check out this band Fish. And then I went to my first show, Jones Beach, 97. And I mean, I was just like, what is this? And at the same time, I just got it from the very first show. And I didn't need any primer, and it wasn't about the community. It was just about the music and the people who were there taking it in together as a group. So I guess it was about the community, but I didn't have a community that drew me into it. I really discovered it on my own. And in fact, I would go to Fish shows just by myself because I just wanted to just listen to the music super intently, and I was really connecting with what was, the live experience and the way that the music unfolded and the way that it came to life. And it was, it was kind of a life-changing moment. And I feel like I got into that, and that didn't necessarily inspire me to play music. It really took me to a level of being a music fan, that I think was a deep thing. It was a really meaningful thing. And then I got my first banjo when I was 18. So unlike a lot of my peers, I had almost like a little sliver of kind of the first part of my adult life where I was not a musician and I was just a fan. And there's a really cool value in that I reflect on sometimes, like with my bandmates when we're talking about just understanding, live music and what we're trying to create. And I was there in the audience with no, no like judgment about how good or bad anything was, no concept of like ripping these ideas off for my own band. It was just like pure. And then I got into the Flecktones, and then a whole new journey started. And I kind of really drifted away from Fish. Now that of course was like in the era when things were kind of weird with them, through the 2000s. And then it was RJ who was in Denver and had come out for Dick's, and he was just like, man, you should come to a show. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And before the show I think had even ended, I was on Flash Seats getting my tickets for the next night. I was just like, this,
Yes.
I was just like back. I mean, and the thing that spoke to me early on was still very much in play, but I had also spent, gone away and spent all this time creating a music career. So there was a big new perspective on it, but there also was this tie back to just like a really pure kind of fandom feeling that is just a special thing. And a deep connection, like I said, to something that I had really discovered on my own, fallen in love with, and was part of changing the course of my life. So since then, I've probably been to another 30 or 40 shows, and, go to all the Dick shows every year and make time for it. And it's just, as you all know now, as like we and all the people that we love Fish alongside of, have gotten a little older, to be able to go back and tap into that thing and to just to appreciate for a minute how the band has achieved longevity. It's a really special thing, and I appreciate it immensely. Just what they have done to basically get their thing in a sustainable place, but create music that I believe is just continues to evolve, and it's as good as anything that they've done. So it's great to be back into it and appreciating it, enjoying it in new and different ways. Because man, I've seen some incredible Fish shows since that, that sort of return to the action with RJ at Dick's.
I kind of returned to it after a break too, and I think there is something special about it. When you come back, you kind of reignite that part of you that was so young and earnest, and discovering that for the first time. It's a great feeling.
So when was your break, Megan?
Yeah, I stopped seeing them kind of like around 98.
Okay.
And then I kind of went back right when they came back in like 2009, but only saw a few shows throughout kind of once a year. But then in 2017, I saw, I don't know what inspired me, but the Baker's Dozen was just so inspiring to me, this concept. And I saw a couple shows and I was like, I'm totally committed again. Fully in. Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
I can relate. Yeah.
Chris, I'm glad that I was part of bringing you back to Fish. I do want to say that the Tahoe show that you chose, I was at that show, and you guys played late night in the casino, and all I really remember is being in there at like midnight Pacific time. I think I had flown in that day, and it was like I had been awake for 24 hours waiting for the show to start, and I was like, "What is going on here?" But I had fun as always. What was the? Well, yeah, I guess first, what made you choose this show?
Well, when you asked me about it, I started to kind of look at like old set lists, and then I had, a bunch of like a pile of ticket stubs, and I was like, where do I want to go with this? And I saw those Tahoe shows, and it just was a really memorable, it was 7/17 and 7/18, the two shows, and I went to both of them. And there was just a lot of good kind of interesting points that came together. I went with all the string dusters on the next night, 7/18, which that's only happened one other time. We went to a Bill Graham show together when we were doing pre-production out there. And, that's always really fun because Fish has been really, really influential on us. And a lot of that is through me. And going deep on this show, I have this like thing that happens when I listen to these shows, which is it's just so unbelievably inspiring. I hear all this stuff and I'm like, oh, we could do that. Oh, we could do that. What are they doing here? And to see it through that lens, I get chills like right now, just even talking about it. And when I am able to bring the guys to a show, suddenly they're able to put these different things in context that we talk about all the time. So like, for example, when we play a String Dusters show, I make the set list and we get together 75 minutes before we hit the stage to have a production meeting, talk through the whole set list, transitions, everything. And the art of this has really evolved over time. And there's a lot of like terminology, for example, type 1, type 2. We talk about that every single night at the production meeting. And it's a great guidepost for what you're trying to do with your music. And no one does it better than Fish. And so to have them come to the show and experience it like that was really cool. Of course, we had the after shows, which were really memorable. It was just a really, awesome couple days. Of course, the tour opener is always an interesting one. And then I started listening back to the show, and the music, of course, is great as it always is. But for kind of all those reasons, it seemed like a good candidate.
Had you ever played a Fish after show after this, or like after had you ever played a Fish after show before this, or have you since this Tahoe run?
No, we had not. That was our first time really doing like a proper after show that was, walking distance from the venue right after. I mean, we've done other things where we played that same weekend as other bands or things like that, but this was, I remember when our agent called me and he's just like, I know I don't need to ask you whether you want to do these shows. and my first question was, well, can I see Fish in its entirety?
Yeah.
And that was an easy yes, because we had the Kitchen Dwellers on the show too. So, and I was going to be a bit of a game time decision, and then we can talk about how it all unfolded. But I saw every minute of Fish, and I was just sort of wondering how it was all going to play out, and if I needed to kind of like pace myself or whatever. But it just turned out to be a beautiful weekend, and the music was really on, and I really did it all that weekend, guys. Let me tell you.
I don't know why I didn't think of this, but I just pulled up the set list from the show you played after this show.
What'd you notice?
Free, Awesome. 2001, you guys had some nerve playing those songs right there, right after everybody saw Fish, and I love it.
Well,
That's awesome.
they started their show with Free
Possum.
and then they go into Possum and I was there with Travis, and we're just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So we got to do this, And one of the fun things about being on stage, especially now with, we see so many of the same faces in the front few rows every time. And so I know, and I make the set list every night. So, which is an awesome, amazing job. Don't tell my bandmates, but when they started to go down that road, I just said to Travis, we got to do this. And so, we play Free, and everyone's like, oh, and then we go into Possum, and you can see the wheels are turning. People are like, are they gonna, and of course we didn't have all these songs down. So, but it was just fun to kind of kick things off in that way. And it just kind of like gets people engaged. And of course we knew we were going to do some of our Fish covers, and we have a lot, some full songs, some are more like teases and parts of songs, but it was just a fun and different way to start off the show. And when you play 100 shows a year, you got to try different things, and you just got to like go out on a limb and do stuff, so that was just, it was fun to see people's reaction to that.
Yeah, I got to say, I also like you mentioning the question about being able to see the entire Fish show. I have a friend who's a Denver-based musician, and he hates when they do Dick's after shows because it's it's a chore, it's a challenge to get there.
It is a challenge, guys. There are ways that one can make their way to a higher plane that would potentially, energize you.
Oh, I'm just
throughout the course of the night. And Travis has always been my partner in crime. And our music takes a lot to play. And so we actually, as a band over the years, and I really appreciate this, the focus on the music, as opposed to the partying or the extracurricular activities has always been just paramount for us. And I think that's a really important for us, just in terms of achieving what we want to with music and remaining, healthy and centered on the road. But this little 2-night run was somewhat of a departure. And it was like, I think no matter what, whether you're going to a show or working on music, just being open to what's going on at that time in the moment is important. It's important to capturing what can be unique about these things. Of course, this is like central to the ethos of these bands as well. And so our band Fish. And so it was a great kind of go with the flow weekend. And we were there at the first night, and I remember they started the encore, and I just looked at Travis and I said, I am not leaving. I'm not leaving until they're done. And he's like, all right, well then I guess I have to stay too. And it was great to see, there was just like a couple people who recognized us on the way out, and they're like, wait, aren't you guys supposed to like be somewhere right now?
What are you doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
Really, it's all very close together at Tahoe.
It is, and very doable in that way. And of course, shout out to the Kitchen Dwellers. They were opening those shows and did a killer job. But sometimes the stars align, and you just get to kind of do it all. And that was one of those 2-night runs.
Did you find the fact that you're playing a show right after a Fish show, that you're taking lessons like mentally from like how the band is performing, and you're almost applying them, immediately when you get on stage? Like, are you taking in the show differently than if you're just going as a fan, you don't have responsibilities afterwards?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm kind of always doing that with music, and I'm always trying to check myself a little bit and just trying to make sure that I'm sort of heeding my own advice that I said there a minute ago, and just kind of being present with it. But when I hear a band like Fish, I just hear, and we can talk, there are some great like specific things from this show that even fall into this category of just like moments where you're just like, oh man, you can do that, and that's how influence works, not just with music, with anything. You hear something that inspires you and you take it, and then ultimately the goal is to kind of make it your own. And here we have one of the greatest live bands ever that is just, again, they're so deeply versed in this kind of high risk, high reward musical environment. So that night, it wasn't necessarily specific things that night as much as it just was the inspiration of seeing music that I love. And that in and of itself is a really important thing to bring us back to center, especially in bluegrass, where there's just like such a high focus on, musicianship and virtuosity, but that's not the thing that connects with people, and like, for example, the metric that I try to use when we play a show is not good or bad, it's not right or wrong. It's just all about whether I was invested in the performance or not. And I know that if I am there and fully giving it my all and fully present with the fans, it doesn't, mistakes don't even affect the statement of the music. I think sometimes they even reveal sort of this more human side, and maybe they can even add to it when you hear someone just on the ragged edge following a thought, and you're on that journey with them, because it's like happening there in the moment. They're not playing it safe. they're not trying to make sure that they get it right. And that's an important thing to me, and something that I think about a lot in terms of performing and really tried to work on over the years. And I think just seeing the band before we were about to play was something that moved me in that direction, and just helped me to not necessarily focus on specific musical elements, but just enjoy the performance and be there and be invested in it. And yeah, and that's, it's like we were talking about earlier about, doing the work ahead of time and preparing. It's like, you got to learn these lessons, sometimes so many times before they actually sink in. But that was a great and very, very sort of real moment of just like igniting that music fandom thing inside me. And that helped put me in touch with that thing that I'm always chasing at a performance. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And that's
Definitely.
also a phenomenal transition into the show, because to set the context for our listeners, this is the tour opener of 2018, which Phish hadn't played together for just over 6 months at this point in time. They closed out 2017, a sparse touring year, but a very big year in Phish history. They played the Baker's Dozen over the summer. They have a banner in Madison Square Garden to prove it. They play 3 phenomenal nights at Dick's, and then they close out the year once again at Madison Square Garden. And we don't really hear anything from them, aside from there were a few classic tab shows that happened in late spring, early summer that were very cool. But when the band comes back, what you're talking about, like that energy, that connection with their fans, in spite of, missed changes, mistakes, all that idea of kind of this raw connection with their fans was so ever present. And it was something that I really remembered going back to this show, because they're coming off of this massive accomplishment. And what do you do next? You've just played the Baker's Dozen. What do you do next as a band? And you hear it almost immediately in this show. It's a bit rough around the edges. It kind of sounds like 2.0 in areas to me. Trey's got a whole new rig that he's trying to experiment with, but right from the gates, Free and MoMA especially are these 2 just phenomenal performances that really kind of showcase a preview into 2018 and even into 2019 and 2021 Phish. What were all of your guys' highlights going through the first set here of the tour opener?
Well, if I may, I'll jump in and say I really love the Free Possum opener. I of course thought of RJ as soon as they roll into Possum, because he's such a Possum fan. But then
I like the String Dusters version of Possum better, actually.
There we go.
But really, I think this whole first set is really hot. MoMA's, jam chart worthy, great version. Ghost is good with kind of an odd ending. And the Funky Bitch rips. Like, I don't know, they're just ready to get at it, right? And Stash is not bad. Rocket Zero, how can you go wrong with this set? It's just, I really enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to blast in my house.
Yeah, one thing that you don't get when you listen back to the show that you do get at a tour opener after a long period is this unbelievable feeling of anticipation. And it, of course, it does come through a little bit on the recording, just because, you can sort of hear the energy bubbling. But, at this point in time, I was back to where I was, looking at set lists when the band was on tour, and I went to the Baker's, traveled to go to the Baker's Dozen, and just really paying attention again. And, not as deeply as some people, but really back to being a fan. And so to be there in the house and to feel the anticipation, woo, I mean, that's a powerful thing. And I think, tour opener is always going to be an interesting show, because especially after that much time off, you hit a stride when you're on tour and you start to take chances. Now, that doesn't necessarily equate to like a better show or a worse show. And I'm sort of the kind of fan who I just appreciate everything that they do. And that might be because I'm in a band and, I want our fans to be that way. It's like, we try all this different stuff, and it's only designed to see if we can reach the top, and the top wouldn't be as high as it is if you reach it every time. So there's sort of this this balance of it all. But in a tour opener, you know, that's not necessarily the time where you're going to hear them like do something deeply different or take these crazy chances. But what you are going to hear is just really, really solid commitment to like digging in and making the music beefy and strong. And it's like, we're coming out to play. And I hear that I hear that with that dog barking, but I also hear that in this show. I mean, it's like they were really, they really got right into it. And MoMA is a great example of like when that song starts, it's like a shock to the audience's system. You know, same thing with No Man and No Man's Land, one of my favorite opening songs to hear.
Yeah.
It's just like, boom, you're just like right out of the gate. And when you have these songs, Funky Bitch, same thing. It's like the groove, the essence of the song sets in right away. It's not like this low point and we're going to go on this crazy journey. And a lot of the jams were like that too. You know, I would say MoMA, and Carini and No Men, like they're more like traveling through these different cool landscapes, less like super deep experimentation, more this is the sound of our band and we're all laying out this thing that we do. And Trey absolutely sounds awesome to me. I mean, there are parts of this show, you know, MoMA, and there are some really creative things. They do a lot, this really creative thing with the chords in Ghost that we could, you know, sort of dig into. And of course, songs that do have the big dynamic ride, Harry Hood, but a lot of them were just almost a little more kind of like one speed that doesn't necessarily sound great, but actually listening back, I love it. And I know at the show, I love that too. It's like,
it's a pretty good speed.
Yeah, it's a pretty good speed. And you're like, they get right up on plane and they're able to like stay there, you know, and there's a lot of that going on in this show. And that to me was like just coming out with Free and such like sort of one of the quintessential sounds of Fish. And it was just strong in that way. And I know that tour openers for us have been like that too. It's like, we're going to play our strong stuff that we know sounds good and lay into it a little bit more as opposed to laying back, because now we've been playing for a few weeks and we want to see where things can go. We want to change it up. It's just like foot is on the gas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. When I was listening to this Free, because Trey's tone sounds so different. And I think about what he was kind of also going through in early 2018 with his friend passing away and writing Ghost of the Forests. And maybe he was feeling a little darker. And I hear that a little bit in his tone, especially in Free, a song that's usually kind of more blissy and piercing in tone. And this sounds a little bit more like textural and darker to me, which is super interesting. And I just heard that a lot throughout the show. I also heard Paige just sounding so strong throughout this show. He's really playing beautifully throughout this whole show. I've really loved listening for him. Also, his singing sounds amazing during Possum. I was like, wow, Mike, your voice sounds so great. But I love it. The MoMA too is so like loose and jazzy. I really like this MoMA. That the MoMA into the Ghost is just really great. I mean, this Ghost gets like so quiet and Paige is just like going off on the piano and Fishman's playing like this cool beat on the drums and Mike has this like sunny groove going on. It's just really beautiful. They have a really crazy description of it on fish.net about like whitewater rafting through like ice cream sundae, which I don't really know what that means, but but I kind of see what they mean. But
that's
kind of
it. No matter what, that's the vibe. You don't need to know what it means.
Exactly.
That's the vibe.
Just go with it. But there's like that awkward stumble back into Ghost, but then it slows down that tempo, and it's really cool how they're doing that. It's like exit out of Ghost is really cool. It's a cool outro. It's a great first set. It's really.
I love when that kind of thing that thing that happens at the end of Ghost where Trey starts to sort of play the signature riff, but he's clearly trying to like pull back the whole band to Ghost tempo. I just really appreciate those, you know, as a fan, but also, you know, from being in a band and hearing them sort of how they work together, how they signify that these things are happening. And that was one of those moments. And then there's like this tension and then they kind of are settle back on this thing. Those are always really satisfying moments for me. I love that.
Same.
This was the first and only time that I went to see shows at Tahoe, and actually the first and only time I think that I've ever bought posters at a Phish show physically, which is strange. But I had the posters are hanging in my dining room. They're really awesome. The venue there it's so interesting because it's like you're in Tahoe, but you're also like in a parking lot. It doesn't feel like going to Dick's or going to somewhere with like a ton of vibe, but like the weather is good and everyone's happy to be in California on like most people are on vacation or it's got like it had a great celebratory vibe. And I thought I agree with what you're saying, Chris. They put a lot into it, especially given what Brian was saying about not playing for so long and not knowing kind of what to expect. It came out of the gate with a pretty solid show. I think this show is like fairly underrated in terms of just what people talk about and like the way it's rated on Fishnet, and going back to it was really fun. I think it's
what is it rated on Fishnet?
3.7 out of 5.
7.
And how you guys you guys are the pro. How does that? What's that?
It's purely arbitrary.
Yeah.
Usually, people rate these things soon after they happen, so there's not a lot of perspective. And,
yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot of
yeah.
fat in the middle of the 5-point scale, and I think there's a lot of shows in the middle of that scale.
Really need to expand
true.
it to 10. Throw the whole thing out. One of those.
I think anything over
right.
4 is like considered like a really, really great show, So like it's but it is interesting because I think these tour openers, because the rest of the 2018 tour, just these shows happen so fast, and then suddenly the Gorge is happening, and then people like it's a lot to listen to and think back on. I think this summer tour is actually pretty good, but I feel like a lot of those shows were overlooked. So I'm glad you chose it, Chris. I think it was fun to go back to.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also have to say about the first set that you posted a video on your Instagram stories, I think, of you during Character Zero.
Yep.
And when I watched that, I thought, it doesn't matter what you think about the show when you listen to it. If you're there during Character Zero, I felt like your joy, and it was awesome. It's like, that's what I miss right now. Like, that was awesome. Thanks for posting that. It was really fun to see.
Tracy, who runs our merch business and is a huge Phish fan, she was there with us night one, and she secretly filmed that video.
Yes.
And shows it to us from time to time. And of course, texted it to me after the show. But, I think it was just cool for her because we're pretty like around the String Dusters world. We run a pretty tight ship. And like I say, there's just like so much work that goes into the music and the production. And then there we are, a couple hours before we're going to play, and we're just absolutely letting loose. I think she was she was surprised by that. And I also have to say a shout out to my man, Casey Zing, who is a good friend and a huge fan. And Casey texted me minutes before the music started and called the free opener, which I thought was very impressive.
Wow.
I've never I don't think I've nailed one of those myself, but Casey is a great friend and someone who I've been to some shows with. But yeah, the text came in, and then when they started playing free, it was just like this clairvoyant moment, and it was great. But Character Zero is just like one of those. It's another example of a song that is kind of automatic, and there are going to be differing versions of it, but I hear that not only in the song choices in this show, but also in the approach to some of these jams. Now the Ghost Jam does this really, really cool thing that I don't think I had never heard them do before. And I have a playlist that I play along with as I'm getting ready to like go out and play shows. And there's a couple versions of Ghost on there, which is really fun to play along with. And they do this crazy kind of modulation where I'm like 90% sure the song is in A minor, and then they drop down and they play all this stuff in G major, and then they shift that, which is like consonant to A minor, so you still feel like you haven't like left the tonal center. I mean, you have, but you're not in this completely other world. But so they go from A down to G, and they're playing in G major, and then they shift and they go to G minor, and they're sort of
Mm.
doing the ghost sound down there in G minor, which is like jarring and cool and different and weird. And then they bump everything back up a whole step minor to minor, which is like not consonant and just very cool and out there. And one of those things that, sort of has me wondering, like, was that planned? And a lot of times, the way that we evolve our live show, it's really predicated on just sort of like comparing notes after the show. Hey, we fell into this really cool thing, and all this like halftime groove happened on such and such a song, and then that sort of becomes part of the song, and a lot of and maybe not necessarily part of the song, or maybe it becomes like a device that we use between songs, and then you'd start to develop this arsenal of like different moves, and those could be rhythmic moves, those could be harmonic moves, those could be sort of like instrumentation layers or whatever. But that was something that really had me listening closely, and it's hard for me to tell sometimes whether those are more like post kind of being a professional musician, or it's hard to remember whether I would have necessarily picked up on that type of thing. But I guess that's my way of saying that even though I feel like dynamically they were really pushing on this show because it's a tour opener, and that's just what you're inclined to do when you come out for the first time after months of being off, there was some really, really cool experimentation that happened. And that to me was just like one of the highlights.
Yeah, I heard what you're talking about, especially in the second set, in the kind of the bookends of the second set, the No Man and No Man's Land that opens things up, and then later in the Harry Hood, Page got all these new keyboards for the Baker's Dozen 1 year earlier, and really impacts the sound of the band's improv. His synthesizers especially have only expanded in the years since, and has really overtaken a lot of the jamming, and has allowed Trey this ability to kind of take a step back and play a little bit more rhythmically, but really give the band new colors as they're moving into improvisational areas. And I hear it in those two songs in particular. They're almost picking up these sounds and these improvisational styles that we heard over the previous year, but starting to move into darker territories and starting to lean a little bit more heavily into the synthesizers. And you would hear that only evolve further as a summer tour goes along. And that was something that like I really found fascinating about listening to this show for honestly the first time since probably the day after the show happened. I always listen to the show the next morning, even if I couch tour it. And I went like going back to this and hearing things that I love about the 2018 jamming style, just kind of the seeds of it all in this, and the No Man, and later the Harry Hood. Like there's this middle section in the Harry Hood that gets so quiet, kind of gets dark, and somehow I don't know how you do this, but like somehow they figure their way back to that, like the uplifting Harry Hood peak, even out of the darkness. Just such fascinating interplay that you hear from the band. As to your point, they're excited to be back on stage. There's probably like nervous energy that's running around because they haven't played in 6 months. And yet they're making real-time discoveries about each other and about where each other's headspace is as they're moving forward. Kind of tack onto that, like I'm curious, when you guys play a tour opener, like do you find that you hear one of your bandmates play something, you're like, I've never heard that out of him, and like that just adds something new as the tour is evolving?
Well, that happens all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously. I mean, I just have to praise my bandmates for a minute. I mean, to me, like I just feel so unbelievably lucky to be in a band with guys who are so talented, so focused, so motivated, because I mean, now it has just become automatic. It's like when you're getting ready to go out on tour, like you have got to be on your game. There is just no other way to do it. And that motivation, of course, comes from, wanting to put on a good show, and, you got all these people paying money to come see you play. But for me, it primarily comes from wanting to be able to hang with my bandmates. Literally, like I know that I'm going to be hearing things all the time. And, when you're playing well, you're listening well. And I think when you're in your own head a little bit and you're trying to, again, back to this like metric of right or wrong, which, I say these things like it does not mean that I accomplish them successfully at every show. This is just like sort of my sort of guide. But I do have shows where I don't feel as great as other nights, and I do sort of fall back into this mode of like, okay, I just need to make sure I get this right. And in those times, I'm not listening as deeply. Whereas when I'm just like flowing and I'm connected to my instrument and everything is lined up, I'm actually not really thinking a lot about what my hands are doing. I'm much more focused on what is coming in from the outside. And what I'm doing almost becomes a part of that. And you hear the sound as one, but my bandmates are an inspiring crew. And, it's really such a gift. And tour opener, especially if you've been off for a while, yeah, you never know what you're going to get, and you never know where things are going to go. And when we have our production meeting, a lot of times we say, hey, a song that the jam, and for us, a 10 song set will usually have like 3, maybe 4 songs that we stretch out on and go into a zone of just totally unknown territory. And when I say unknown territory, that all sort of falls on kind of a gradient. Some things are more known than others, but we will have times, and sometimes it's as simple as just sort of saying to each other, reminding each other, hey, let's like really try and get into like a type 2 situation here, where it's not about disconnecting from where you were. It's just really about being super present in the moment. And when you usually disconnect and go somewhere totally new. And it's all a function of listening. And, it's funny. I think that does happen on a tour opener, but I would say even more as shows go along, you hear more creativity, just because it's like, okay, we sort of got that solid base and, maybe performances of a song that are a little bit more like down the middle. And we're the kind of band where fans are not coming to one show, they're coming to all the shows on the tour, they're streaming from bar. We got to figure out some new stuff to do, and so it happens in different ways. I would say like earlier in the tour, a lot of what I hear is just like chops. Like I hear guys just shredding, and that kicks your ass and motivates you. And then as the tour goes along, maybe a little bit more as a group, as a band, we find some of that improvisational stride where we're just, it's just amazing the trust, that you develop with people. And when I explain sometimes how jamming works to like the totally uninitiated, and like bluegrass people are curious about this stuff because there's no jams in traditional bluegrass. An average bluegrass song is like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes long, and it's just like flies by
90 miles an hour.
Exactly. But the musicianship is sky high. So why can't we like marry these worlds? And that's what, our band has always tried to do. But when it comes to explaining these things to people, it's so much more just about me and my bandmates and where we're at and being in the moment than it is about any specific musical thing. So it's hard to explain, but that, I always notice as tours go along that just more and more creativity coming in, more and more chances being taken as a band with the direction of the song. And that's just always one of the exciting things about being on stage, is like you never know what, where things are going to go.
I want to take a moment and talk, kind of focus on set 2 real quick. And then I'm going to have to go and do some family things, I think. But I was looking back in preparation for this. We covered these shows on HFPod, as it was happening. I think we probably did quick hits and all of that stuff. And so as like Brian, I was listening every day. I started building a playlist in my Live Fish app, which I called 2018 Summer Slammers. And top of that list is No Men in No Man's Land.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Shredding.
This thing is
shredding,
outstanding. It's like, what, 17 minutes long? And I want to appeal to the fish.net gods to recognize with their jam chart, because this version belongs there. It's so good. And it comes back. They land it nicely. They kind of bring the groove back. It is, it's outstanding. Carini is killer. Slave is beautiful and beautifully placed too. And no, Ryan, I did not spell it Slammers with a Z, but I can edit that. And Bouncing in the Middle, because I don't know, it's tour opener, and Bouncing is a great song. It's a good chops exercise, and Soul Planet, and I love the drop into Steam at a Soul Planet. I think that is outstanding. And you guys talked about the Hood. I no hate, all love on Harry Hood, of course. And
Well,
what a great encore. What a great encore.
this was the second Soul Planet, and it's pretty fascinating how they play it on New Year's Eve. It's the theme of the third set going into the 2018 Auld Lang Syne, and then it comes back, and this really showcases where the band is going to take Soul Planet, because this summer the versions from LA on 7/28 and the version from Alpharetta on August 4th are some of my favorite versions of Soul Planet that have ever been played, specifically the August 4th one. If you want to hear like where this tour was 2 weeks later and how the sounds that they're throwing out and the new jamming styles and kind of where their heads are at 2 weeks later, this Soul Planet really showcases it. But yeah,
this one's no slouch too. It's
but that's the thing.
It's a dozen minutes, 13 a baker's dozen minutes long. It's they go at it.
I agree that No Man it's got this sound. This is one of the ways that I think about Phish is they have this like variety of like quintessential sounds. They have like that the really dark and dirty stuff. They have funky sounds. They have their really pretty kind of like ethereal stuff, and there's something that they get into in No Man and Trey's got this. He's got this certain tone going, and yeah, it is different like than what's happening in the past, but he still speaks so authoritatively, even in this like slightly different and new tone. But they keep it at a pretty like high clip throughout the jam. It's not like it starts slow and builds, but I'm into it the whole time, and it's so much, as a lot of what I'm drawn to is just revolves around the guitar sound, and it's like a voice, and that's what I tell people a lot of times when they don't necessarily understand or get this band. I feel like there's so much is expressed by the band as a whole, but through that certain sound of the guitar, and not when he's like he's playing these long tones and almost like this yawning, like edgy tone that's just like it's so compelling, and you can really knock someone out with a crazy fast passage, but you can also really connect with someone just through one note if the tone is right, and you have that really on full display. And then the other thing I love about this sunset, especially listening back, I'm like a lot of people, the albums in the last, recent years, there's some great stuff on there, but I always gravitate toward live. But I loved Sigma Oasis, and I think the version of Steam on there is so sick. It's so freaking awesome. And, it's like hearing that back, I don't know. I have an appreciation for that song and the way that like slow groove, that is hard to do. Sometimes playing faster is almost easier because you just sort of set the thing in motion and away it goes. But to maintain that groove when there's all that space between the notes is impressive. And I've ever since Sigma Oasis, because I've heard Steam many times, but I've just like totally fallen in love with that song, and it's on my top list of stuff that I love to hear. And when I was listening back to the show, and then that kicks into that slow groove, it's just like it's so good. And then the way the song is structured and the way that they hit that one big chord change right before the guitar solo takes off, to me that's like it's like a masterpiece of arranging. It just like propels the whole motion of the song forward and then gives you somewhere to come back to at the end. So that was just one more really cool element of the show to relive, and maybe one thing that I appreciated, in a new and different way listening back now, than I did in 2018.
Yeah, that note about like the slow groove of Steam and how when they play that in front of 10 to 20,000 people, and they're just holding people with this slow groove, where you can when you're playing fast, if you mess up, someone's going to notice it, but not, most people are just like along for the energy. But a song like Steam is so reliant on just everything plodding along at the right pace, everyone hitting their right notes, everything just connecting. And when they play it late in a set, it feels like they're all just connected on a completely different level at that point, because you're not playing that groove when you're not like feeling the vibe of what that, like how that song feels and how it's delivered to the audience.
Yeah, I agree. It takes
Mhm.
some commitment to throw
Yeah.
that deep in a second set, but it works for me. I love that one.
I also love how you can listen to songs like and appreciate them in a different way
For sure.
because of like, hearing it on like, an album format and then going back and
Totally.
listening to it again. Like that's one thing that's so awesome about Fish, because you can appreciate songs in different ways at different times. It's so cool.
Yeah, and they evolve over time, and
Yeah.
and this is a rare case of where like the evolution that that usually that starts with an album version, and here we have an example where the album version comes so later on what I thought was
Yeah.
a really cool album.
I love that album.
I found myself, I just listened to it a lot of times, and I put that album version of Steam on my kind of like top Fish playlist, which I can share with you guys if that would be a cool thing
Yes,
for
please.
the HFPod people. I'll send you guys a link, and then you can blast it out through your social media and
Please do.
see what's on my top list.
I don't tend to reminisce fondly about April 2020, but the release of Sigma Oasis was like one of the greatest parts of that spring, when the band had us
Yeah.
all huddled together.
I know,
around the
that was cool.
television. They debuted it. It
Yeah.
was like one of those early moments where you're like, okay, there are going to be ways that we can all kind of connect through this process.
For sure.
And
Hearing
somehow
Steam
all
end
the
up with it
lyrics
was
were
great.
like completely appropriate for the time. It was just really weird, like how, I don't know, kind of knowing a lot of those lyrics were. I mean, they wrote it before, but it's just incredible. Yeah.
It is. So as we do here, when we conclude talking about deep diving a show, everyone gets one jam. What is the jam you're recommending from this show that listeners should go back to and check out? Chris, you're our guest. You get to answer first.
Well, I would say No Men, but I would say MoMA close second. I think they have a similar vibe, and both of those songs, like I said earlier, they're just like, it's like you just shock the crowd and put a bolt of energy into everyone, and I love that, and it just like gets things rolling. But similar character, but I always love MoMA because it's got a certain thing that we as a band have sort of ripped off, a jam vehicle, if you will, where they come back to that awesome lick, that they all sort of like center back around that one really cool lick at the end of MoMA, and it's a great way to like, you're heading there, and then one guy suggested, and then sort of the door is cracked open, and then everybody starts to go, and then we're all kind of grooving on that one thing. But yeah, I would say No Men and MoMA close second.
Meg, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I have to go No Men's. It's kind of funny because it's not even listed on Fish.net as a jam on the jam charts, which is just weird. But that jam, I'm sorry, my dog.
Your
jam,
dog is just angry that it's not on the jam charts.
I know. Reba's like, what the hell?
I get the sentiment.
Yeah, she gets it. Yeah, I just think that jam has everything. There's like nice peaks. It goes into like a groovy jam, then it gets spacey and trippy. It's just, I really like it. And the MoMA dance is one of my all-time favorite Fish songs. So I have to agree with you. But I think the No Man is my favorite from the show.
Yeah, the No Man was a shocking moment. I'm gonna, just for the sake of diversity, so our listeners have 3 jams to listen to, I'm throwing out the hood. I was blown away when they got to this. There's never a moment where they start Harry Hood and I get in any way upset or like, I wish they were playing another song. Like, I'm right there for the emotions that I know are coming with every Harry Hood. And so I was there for this when it came on as I was listening to the show. And then as they dropped into the jam, I was like, these are new sounds that I don't remember from this tour. But like I was saying earlier, I'm hearing aspects of summer 2018. Like one of my favorite shows from this year happened just 5 days later, 7/22/2018, the final night at the Gorge. It's one of my favorite Fish shows of the last 10 years. It flows incredibly well. It's like every song should be played next. Everything has, especially in the second set, a really cool, quiet, kind of methodical jam into it. And you hear that in this Harry Hood. You hear that approach. And so hearing them come on stage 6 months after one of their strongest years ever, and somehow picking up their instruments and moving forward in a really unique and new way, while also taking these sounds that we heard from a year earlier. It was a fascinating trip back to the early part of the summer 2018 tour. So thank you so much for Chris for recommending this. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. I'll do this anytime. So
Oh my gosh, yes, come back. That'd
We're
be awesome.
we're gonna have you
I would
on to
love
dive
that.
into some old shows, man.
I would love that. And if you guys
well-
can ever make it out to a String Duster show, you let me know and we got to say hey.
Oh,
Absolutely,
I'm there
absolutely.
for sure.
I think I'm gonna be going to that Red Rock show, so I'll hit
Awesome.
you up. That would be great.
Please do.
Jealous.
Absolutely, man. So you hit the road in like a week. You're
Yep.
starting in Indianapolis,
Mhm.
and all the while you've got Bela Fleck on the podcast. So
Yes.
all of our listeners out there, subscribe to Inside the Musician's Brain, and please go and see the String Dusters as they're on tour here in the spring. Really, really excited to see you guys here a little bit later in the springtime.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you for having me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. It was great
This is
hanging with
so
you,
fun.
and we'll talk with you soon, dude.
Okay. Sounds great. See you guys.
All right, man. All right. That was super awesome, Meg.
That was so great.
We've lost two co-hosts in
It's just
the
you and me,
midst of this
Brian.
show, but that was a ton of fun. What do we have coming up next week, though, as we're looking ahead?
We are backtracking and we're talking about Hoist. And
We're
I'm
talking
super
about
excited
Hoist.
about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyone who has listened to HFPod over the last couple of years will know that previous incarnations of the show, the host went through the band's studio albums in a backtracking style, going back through, listening to the record in full, talking about the inspirations around the album, the recording process, really diving deep. And they ended on Rift back before HFPod initially closed its doors for Undermine. We are back now, and we are restarting the backtracking process. So I'm really excited to be diving into Hoist, which was funny enough. When I first got into Fish, I asked a friend in math class, what Fish album should I buy? Because I wasn't thinking about live shows. I was just thinking, what CD should I buy? And he said, anything but Hoist. And it's become one of my favorite Fish records. It's such a great,
It's so
great
great.
record. It's awesome. So yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday, February 16th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Before we go, though, we need to hear one more time about our friends at Sunset Lake CBD.
Yeah, Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned hemp farm, and they're located right outside Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm, and they actually produced milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. And they're amazing because they have really embraced Vermont's tradition for land stewardship, and they use sustainable and regenerative farming techniques. And they really believe in building and protecting healthy soils. They are 100% pesticide free. They use minimal tillage, and they implement cover crops and crop rotations. And this is super cool. They also serve as a research farm for the University of Vermont's agronomists. Did I say that right, Brian? Agronomists?
You said that right.
think I
Yes,
did.
I'm just going to give you
Yay.
a thumbs up on that.
Yay.
I gave you the
So
ad
there's-
read with all the challenging words.
I know. I was like, wow, okay. I'm going to learn some new words today. But yeah, they study hemp and they inform best industry practices, which is really cool. And I also just got a care package, and it's been great because I don't know if I've told you this, Brian, but I've been going through a really stressful home renovation project, and I have really enjoyed the gummies this week. They've really taken the edge off and allowed me to go to sleep better, stop worrying. So thank you, Sunset Lake CBD. And check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use coupon code HFPod and you get 20% off your products. That's Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown. And let me tell you, they're going to come quick too. Mine came really fast.
Yeah, I was really blown away by how quickly it came. And the CBD usage to take the edge off of the home renovation projects. As someone who just signed off on new home renovation projects,
Oh
this spring,
no.
I'm about 3 months behind you, but I know I'm gonna need something like Sunset Lake gummies. So yeah,
You're gonna need a lot. The tinctures, the pre-rolls, you're gonna need all of it.
gonna need the whole thing. So
Yeah.
keep it coming, Sunset Lake, because we love you. We love you guys, and we're excited to continue to promote. But with that, we are gonna bid you all farewell. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us here today, wherever it may be, late afternoon, early evening. Maybe you're watching this from Asia and it's early morning. Who knows what it might
Maybe.
be for you all? Maybe we have a far reach, but thank you all for hanging with us. We will be back next Wednesday, February 16th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern to talk through Hoist. Until then, take care of yourselves, and we look forward to talking with you all here soon.
Thanks, everyone.